Alrighty, so the servers are down. So if we're gonna have an actual yap session about how Warrior's doing, now is the time. And compared to my other videos where I'm kind of doing a little more like reacty type shit, where it's like, oh my god, pour water on my face, woo, you know, let's actually talk about it. Let's be reasonable on this kind of thing. Where the reality of the situation is right now, currently, even though you're seeing these, right, you're seeing that Fury is falling quite low in terms of overall damage. And this, if you look at specifically damage to bosses, Fury is literally bottom of the barrel for damage to bosses. Even though this is the case and this is true, there's a problem. And the problem is that no other class can do what Fury Warrior can do in burst AoE. And for Brood Twister and Queen Ansurek, explicitly, you need that burst AoE profile. Regardless of how much damage we're doing overall, Fury is still very, very good for the raid. Regardless of the nerfs, Fury is still very good right now for the raid only. And this is where we're having this discussion because it's kind of a problem. Because these ads are so important on Brood Twister and Queen Ansurek, that if they live long enough to get out of control, and I'm not even talking about like the worms or the spiders on Brood Twister, I'm talking about just like the little guys, little Kahuni guys. And then on Queen Ansurek, there's the tank buster that spawns a bunch of spiders. And if those spiders reach the queen, they blow up and kill the whole raid. So there are paramount of importance to kill. Like you say, like the problem is that Fury has to save all of their damage for ads. And we're not actually really doing that much damage to the boss. We're doing our job in raid, and we're actually performing well in the raid because of that, all of these ads and doing our job. And then even if we need single target damage, Arms is still performing quite well for just overall single target. So we still have Arms as an option, even on fights like Rashanan or Silkran. Bloodbound's kind of whatever. I mean, Ulgrax, there is AoE, but like only the boss damage really matters. Like, I don't know. It's mainly the issue that I guess the Warrior community, the Fury Warrior community is facing, where, yeah, we're doing good in the raid, but we're so hyper specifically good in these situations that it's making the rest of the game suffer. Which what we're probably going to see, especially in like higher Mythic Plus. We don't really have the gear to do high Mythic Plus right now. 12s and 13s are kind of the limit. But even then, you will look at the video Crit Cake made, which I'd recommend taking a peek at. Crit Cake is a very smart, very good warrior player. Two things warriors generally aren't, or at least one of the two. But in his video, he even shows that somebody with way less item level than him, right, with way less gear than him, is doing more overall damage. And you might go, oh, it's just overall. Why does that matter? It's because realistically, when you look at things like open world content or Mythic Plus, overall damage really matters. Like, people meme on it, but it actually does matter in many situations, because you simply need to do, if the mobs that you have to kill in a dungeon, like, because you need count, right, to complete the Mythic Plus dungeon, if those mobs have X amount of health and you have X amount of time in combat to kill those mobs, if your class simply does not have X amount of damage and X amount of time, you simply are unable to complete it. At a certain point, Mythic Plus is infinitely scaling, so being unable to complete it is just in the nature of it, right? But with the consistent nerfs to Fury's AoE specifically, because of how well they've performed in the raid from 3 fights, I mean, Bloodbound is actually a decent Fury fight as well, just because you get to do AoE and hit the boss. But because of the amount of AoE you can do on Bloodbound, Rashanan, Brood Twister, and Queen, so half of the raid fights, it has significantly stunted Fury's ability to do consistent overall damage in other forms of content. And interestingly enough, I'm a proponent that Mythic Plus is actually the primary game mode for most players. And you might think, well, everyone goes and plays for Raid, so how could that be the case? And it's simply because you spend X amount of time in Raid, right? It takes a lot of time to get all those people together, so you have everyone scheduled to spend this much time in Raid. But most players spend, if this much time in Raid, they spend this much time in Mythic Plus, at least early on, right? To get all of the gear, the best statted stuff you can get, rings, trinkets, that kind of thing. They spend way more time in Mythic Plus compared to Raid. Towards the end of the season, that can either be equal to or less, as more players might be just Raid logging towards the end of a tier. But realistically, Mythic Plus has way more playtime for a lot of players on their individual time than Raid. And because of that, I do believe that Mythic Plus balance really does matter. There's obviously always going to be something that is the best, but right now, because of this burst AoE profile that we're dealing with in Raid, it has actually really stunted our overall static damage in Mythic Plus. So what I think I would like them to do is they either need to buff our tier set. Our 4 set is very, very bad. I'd like to see changes for our 4 set for Fury to make it better consistent damage. What the? A little too many wubs there, mister. But I want to see our 4 set buffed. I feel maybe they need to... I'm actually totally fine with them nerfing Bladestorm and Odin's Fury. But something that's interesting as well is a lot of people also don't really consider PvP. And Fury War has actually taken a pretty decent hit in PvP too. We're decent, but with the nerfs to Bladestorm and Odin's Fury, those are base nerfs, and those nerfs are seen in PvP too. So that is actually a pretty sizable nerf to the class in PvP as well. Arms is definitely not doing well in PvP either. But the conundrum is I'm not sure how to go about it. I'm not sure where to go about it, and I'm not sure where the devil in the details are here. Well, I know where the devil is. It's just the fact that they made ads so important on these fights that you're required to bring a class that does damage in that does almost all of its damage in a 5 to 10 second window, and then they do nothing for the rest of the fight comparatively. And that's because they have created ads that need to die, like the Brood Twister ads or the Queen ads or the Rashinan ads, right? It's a very rough situation to be in. And what I want is Fury. Basically, I want them to nerf Fury AoE, which they've done, but they need to bring up Fury's single target. I think doing things like buffing the tier set, buffing Rampage. There's also the problem that Fury has always faced, where our single target is our AoE, but I think having decent, consistent AoE by buffing stuff like Bloodthirst, Raging Blow, and Rampage, whereas nerfing Odin's Fury and Bladestorm is fine. I think those things probably need to be buffed a bit. So if they want to bring down Fury's burst AoE potential, they should bring up its consistent damage. But the actual other issue with you can say that, but the actual other issue with doing that is if you nerf Fury's AoE potential that much, or Fury's burst AoE potential that much, it might severely negatively impact the raid. Because we're running 2, maybe even 3 warriors for Brood Twister and for Ansarek. For Ansarek, I don't really think you need 3. You don't need 3 warriors. You don't really even need 2. I think 1 warrior is good enough, but you do need other classes that are good at killing ads. I don't know. We're just in a very rough situation right now, because the way the raid is designed accentuates the very strength our class has, but because our class's strength is required to that degree, and it has made such an impact, now Fury itself has been nerfed very heavily, to the point where I'm almost considering how much value it actually brings anymore outside of those burst AoE situations, and playing something like arms and then just throwing a point into cleave or something like that might be way more valuable than the sheer amount of quote unquote pad Fury does, because our consistent damage has taken such a significant beating with the nerfs we've received. So yeah, it's a very I'm kind of at a loss, because there's I've talked in circles. I was about to talk about how, hey man, it's really rough to balance Fury because the AoE it does is directly tied to the single target it does, which wasn't nearly as true this season because of the buffs to Blade Storm, giving Fury Blade Storm, and the buffs to Odin's Fury, making those buttons very, very strong. On top of things like Titan's Torment, giving us multiple Odin's Furies in a burst window. Things like Titan's Torment also giving us Avatar also accentuates that, because for like example for Brood Twister, when you go into a situation where you're saving Blade Storm and you have Odin's Fury Blade Storm, it means that you're going to be able to Odin's Fury, and then when you Odin's Fury, it enrages you, it gives you whirlwind charges, but it also gives you 4 seconds of Avatar. So you Odin's Fury, then instantly Blade Storm, which means every single Blade Storm you cast in that fight is buffed by an additional 20% because of that interaction with Titan's Torment. It is possible that they removed Blade Master's Torment for arms because of how it was going to interact with the class with Slayer. And I'm almost wondering if they just started mowing outside. I almost wonder if they either need to change or adjust how Titan's Torment works as well to kind of rein in the burst AoE potential that Fury has. Because one thing I think is actually kind of interesting is, let's say they give Titan's Torment the Titan's Torment the Warlord's Torment treatment, and it's just worthless to take. One thing that could be interesting for our consistent AoE damage is the fact that if they remove that, then we can just go play 45-second Roar instead and still have 2 points in Armor to the Teeth. And that's a potential. But that would only work if they did buff our consistent damage. So yeah, it feels like we're between a rock and a hard place because of fight design currently. Because we're good for the raid. Like, Fury is good in the raid, but it's causing that spec to suffer significantly outside of the raid because of it. And I think we'll see that much more going into the later season of Mythic Plus as the health pools go up, the value for Fury goes way down, and we're probably going to be playing like Juggernaut arms or something, Slayer and keys. Maybe. I don't know about Colossus, but we'll see. That's kind of where Fury's looking at right now. That's my actual talk instead of just being like, oh my god, patch notes, wah. But yeah, I will see you online. Bye bye.